Welcome into the end of the Closed Realm Builders. This series is winding down, but before we left, I wanted to share the things that I have learned from this series. The original purpose was to try to unlock a title and to try to just learn more about the game so that when I'm streaming this next time, we'll have a smoother go of things. So I figured I would kind of make a quick little video here and share what I've learned as a relative new player to Song of Six. As mentioned, the first thing we learned was titles are not impossible to get. You can definitely do it, but that being said, they're not quick either. We originally wanted to go in and get the nudist because I thought this would be the easiest one to do. And being nude isn't that hard. I mean, you just literally don't make clothes. What was hard though was the time played. I actually had to do a lot of time in the game. We were pretty deep into the series before that actually procced. Now, I've been told there's some ways you could cheese it, but I legitimately did get this. And another thing to note is you have to get these unlocked on every race to get the full bonus. So I believe we have like 50% of max bonus, and we get the rest of it based on doing it with each race. Now, it will be easier each time for this one, for example, because we'll have the bonus of the title going into it. In the end, we ended up actually getting, I believe we got the artisan first, which is create a bunch of goods. Then we got first their name, which is a population milestone. And then we finally got nudist. So I would encourage you to maybe take a look at the different titles and maybe just shoot for maybe one of those or a different one that you find easy to give yourself a goal when you're learning the game. Because you're probably going to want to quit and restart and use things that you've learned or correct mistakes that you made. But hanging on a little longer, pushing to make that little bit of goal, A, will give you a title, which might make your next run a little easier, and B, is just a way to kind of give yourself a reason to persevere and push deeper in the game. And that's going to make you learn more mechanics, hence this list having 10 plus different tips. My second tip is that check out the race that you've chosen, or races, depending on how you're going to play your city, and really take a minute and learn about them right from the get-go, because different races are going to want different things. I'm going to use the example of the Amivians because that is what I wanted to play here. I wanted to keep things, I'm going to say simple, I'm air quoting myself there, by having a single race in my city, so I didn't have to worry about competing desires, etc., etc. Now, there are pros and cons to that we found out during this playthrough. For the Amivians, for example, one thing I would say is find out what they're good at and what they're bad at. For example, we are really good at fishing, like really, really good at fishing. So fish is a main food staple for us. It is also one of our food preferences, luckily enough. But different races, of course, are going to be good at different things. See about, at least in the early game, leveraging your advantage of things you're good at and your people like to do, because that's going to let you grow relatively quickly. And if you can do it efficiently, that gives you something that perhaps you could trade to your neighbors to make some cash to be able to buy things that you are not good at. Other examples for the Amivians are they do not like the other races. So I knew from the get-go that I was not going to have anyone else move in. It was going to only be Amivians. So I could make decisions on different technologies to unlock, different foods to get. Very simple because I was only trying to please one. One of the other advantages that we had with the Amivians was that we liked mud well enough that I could do most of my city in mud. I didn't have to spend wood or stone to make my buildings pleasant. So I would take some time, get in here, you can check this question mark and look through what they like, look at what they're good at, etc., etc. And then you can also look at the different screens here, which will show you things that they want or don't want in their city. For example, I can see here, Amivians would like it if we would raise our own population rather than having people move in. That's not super hard, but it's not super quick. So for example, in this one, even though I have quite a few hatcheries, you can see here, I only have a tiny bit of native population, for example. Another example, for Amivians at least, is that they actually don't care particularly about burial rights. A mass grave is good enough for them. I didn't get any bonuses, for example, by having a cemetery, which I had originally unlocked because I thought, oh, well, they'll like to have a nice burial place. Well, they actually didn't care. They had other things that they cared about a lot more, like having water access. one of the good things I did in this city was I put in these ponds, which were somewhat research intensive, but that meant that my people could go here for a swim and they wouldn't spend half their day walking to the water for a swim. So take some time, really go through the different screens of what the race that you're gonna play likes. Maybe look at some different combos of maybe you find a couple races that like similar enough things that you could kind of double dip on them. Next up is resource management. Another big thing right away is when you pick a map, look at the resources you have. Look at what you're going to need. Look at what you're going to be short on. One thing I identified very early on this map was that I don't actually have a lot of forest. My best forests were actually over here, which is just on these islands, not something particularly accessible. So right from the get-go, I started doing a lot of woodcutters, and that paid off a lot because otherwise I would not have had the wood that we needed to make furniture, for example, to progress down the building chains, to sell, for other construction that you need it for. But a lot of buildings, even if you do them out of mud, still are going to need to have wood on the inside. So on my map, that was one resource that I knew I was going to need right away and do that. Another, for example, could be maybe your race needs a lot of stone. Be careful if you are picking a map that's going to be difficult for you on. Next up is infrastructure and services. The way you're going to increase your population in the early game is by having people move in. How do you get people to want to move in? Well, they need to like where they're at. And that's going to go back to looking at the various things that your people like and want and picking up things that you can do with your technology level to make them happy. In the early game, that's going to be things like a hearth, a well, a speaker, maybe a market to give them food so they don't have to just eat it off the warehouse floor. Make sure you're getting the foods that they like. So there's a lot of things you can do that will make people essentially happier, which will encourage other people to want to move in. If you right click here, you can auto set, and that's usually what I would do is I'd set whatever number I had the housing ready for. So if I was at 100 people, maybe I'd go up to 120 max, and then I would just let this fill in as I was able to fulfill their happiness and convince other people to move in. Another tip here on the picking your map, in this one, I needed a lot of water pumping because I needed to have those ponds, and I have quite a agricultural system all irrigated on this map that I needed a lot of pumps. And on this map, this is where the salt water starts. This is the fresh water. You can only pump the fresh water. So I had to be here, and some of this was originally water tiles that I filled in and was able to build my pumps here. So you can actually extend the land a little bit in order to fit yourself in a full size or a larger pump than you might otherwise be able to fit. So just a way that we could optimize our space a little bit. If I was unable to put pumps here, I would have had to have started my cities over on this side, further up river and away from the sea. But I wanted to be near the sea because the sea has better fishing, and as mentioned earlier, Amivians are quite good at fishing. Next up is some more higher level thoughts on services and other things to strive for. One thing I hemmed and hawed a little bit about in this series was early technology. One thing you're going to get as you go up in titles, you get some free points for the research and innovation. So we have knowledge and innovation here, and that's going to allow you to unlock various things. In the early game, just getting more people doing efficient jobs is going to end up giving you more technology than trying to do early laboratories and libraries. These are very labor intensive, and unlike mini games, you don't just unlock a technology, you have to maintain the points that you use to unlock it. So as you go deeper down the tree, you're going to need more and more people working in laboratories and in libraries. And at least for us, we were not particularly good at that. So it was a heavy investment to do. So you need to pick your technologies pretty frugally. And I would say concentrate on things that are going to make people happy, thus allowing you to get more people. And at some point, you'll be able to pick some technologies that make people more efficient. So like in this one, find a good example. Like I have saws, so I can use tools in my woodcutters to make my woodcutters more efficient. So I got to the point where the people needed to maintain that technology were less than the amount of saved labor at my woodcutters. So just because you get a bonus doesn't necessarily mean that it's worth it, because you have to maintain those technologies. Another one that we looked at quite early was trying to keep our hygiene relatively high. That meant building the lavatories, so that's a quite early service that A, most people are gonna like, and B, is a pretty nice little health boon up until later on, because the health industry itself is a bit labor intensive and a bit technology intensive. So you can really do yourself a favor by making sure you're spacing those around. On that same topic, make sure you're putting various services around. So at first I only had these kind of centralized areas, but I quickly realized I needed to put some wells and some hearths and some bathrooms out and about where people are working. Because if you spent a quarter of the day walking here, and then you had to go to the bathroom and spend a quarter of the day walking back to the bathroom, and then do that again, well, you basically didn't go fishing. And so a lot of work wasn't getting done, even though they looked like they were very busy. So you can really help yourself out by, especially the cheap services, just spacing them around and making sure that they can access those wherever they're going to be needed. Another one is the food. If you're having trouble at your food stalls, trace the logistics. At one point, I had stalls, I had people working in the stalls, and I just wasn't getting the fish where I needed it. Well, it turned out the fish was just sitting at the various fisheries, and I needed to add some haulers, some better placed warehouses to get the fish essentially to market. So having a local warehouse that is able to provide a short walk to resupply that is much better than somebody working at the food stall walking all the way out to where the fish are getting caught and bringing it back. Very fresh, but quite inefficient. Another major milestone is those population levels that I've mentioned a couple times. Those are going to be really important because they're going to unlock various things. For example, when you become an emir at 50 population, you can start importing and exporting. So you can do something that you're doing efficiently, or you just have extra of, sell that off. Maybe that could be something like fish for us, or maybe you build furniture, or whatever it is. If you could get some people to trade it off at a decent price, and then import something that you can use to either produce something you can't normally make yet, like maybe you want some early iron to build a few buildings out of iron, or maybe you need to hire some mercenaries, or the money gives you a lot of flexibility that you otherwise wouldn't have. So that's a great one. Here's where we unlock some more free points. Going up to Pontics, it gives us the training ground so we can start doing army stuff and some law stuff. And obviously you're just going to unlock more and more as you go through there. Another big one is nobles. Once you get down to rank 6 and you get nobles, this is another way that you can really increase your efficiencies. So not only can you appoint a noble to an industry, later on you'll also be able to level that noble up. So make sure you're matching up the amount of workforce and the amount of nobles or levels of nobles that are boosting it. This is quite noticeable. At one point I had tried to move these furniture guys around, and I went from quite positive on furniture to quite negative on furniture. So these are pretty powerful. Don't think that you need to build their noble specific housing. I still have not built it in this game. I'm above 2,000 population. I have 10 nobles, and I haven't built them any specific housing. So it's not like a game like Dwarf Fortress where they're going to have tantrums and destroy your town. They'll get over it and encourage people to build more chairs, basically. Another major jump in your city is going to be as you go up the technology tree. In this city, my iron was one of my big turning points because I needed to get cut stone, and to do cut stone, I needed to have iron, and that went down a whole rabbit hole of industries. Iron especially is probably one of I don't know, maybe moving from early game to mid game, maybe one of the markers I would use, because iron is so ubiquitous on the better buildings. You're going to need it for all different kinds of things. I don't have them on the top of my head, but they're going to be super duper important as you want to build various things. So for example, a hospital needs tools. Tools need iron. So to get beyond base early game health things, hospital is one of your first stops, needs iron. If you wanted to build something, some of the law stuff needs iron, etc., etc. Tools is another big one that you can use those tools in various technologies, like give tools to your fishermen to become more efficient, or as previously mentioned, my woodcutters use those tools now. Again, though, you have to remember there's an opportunity cost. Is the amount of labor I'm using to make the iron. So I have to get the ore, I have to make charcoal because I didn't have coal in a good position. I have to make the iron, I have to take the iron and make it into tools, I have to move the tools. Is all that labor gonna actually be less than the labor I would need to get more fish without the tools? So there definitely is an inflection point where it goes from efficient to inefficient. However, you're gonna have to do that at some point because to go up the building/tech tree, you're obviously going to need iron. That also is as you want to move into military to protect yourself, because the neighbors and bandits in this game are absolutely brutal. We've been robbed several times, and some of them have basically just wiped out all my stores. Luckily, I have a pretty good economy for bouncing back from that, but it sucked. It sucks to lose all your food that you could have sold and then, you know, done something with. So you're going to want to protect yourself at some point. In this game, we did start building some walls. We never had an opportunity to build them. I built these after we got attacked one time. But yeah, another thing you want to think about is how are you going to protect yourself? Metal to get your own guys, money to hire mercenaries. Maybe start thinking about a plan for that. Next up is advanced logistics. I had some thoughts on logistics, and some of them worked pretty well, some of them didn't work as well. One thing I would say is you're definitely going to want a warehouse at least this large in the early game. You're going to have kind of like a I have to hold everything warehouse at the beginning, but quickly you'll have the workforce that you could have a separate warehouse. I want one warehouse that is basically supplying the goods that are for my marketplace, my food stalls, but also to support my janitor. So as we go down the tech tree, I needed to add more and more things here. For example, I have to have leather here because people would like to put that in their house. I need to have furniture here, not only for houses, but also because the furniture is used in upkeep. Same thing with the cloth, the wood, the cut stone, the stone, the iron, the tools. All those are things that my janitors need to keep my more advanced buildings up and running. So having a good logistical system is going to help a ton. How do you get things here? Well, that was one I don't think I did very good in this game. My original thought was I will just keep increasing the amount of workers in here. I have 15 workers here and they are not keeping this very well stocked. This is not working particularly well. Another attempt I did was on the second town. I left some room outside and I have these little like tiny haulers, and each one of these employs 1 or 2 people, and they have one thing that they haul and they bring it right here, and then it gets hauled ideally inside to my warehouse. This worked better, but not the best. Another thing I tried was I have kind of this central warehouse district, and my thought was we would have one big warehouse for, like, let's say fish. All my fish would be brought here and then I could redistribute it out. The problem is that's a lot of hauling for haulers. If I was gonna do this again, instead of using the haulers, I would actually move up probably to loading and unloading stations. The problem with that is size. This is the smallest one right here. I mean, it is gigantic. I believe it also uses livestock. So you're gonna need to be producing some livestock if you wanna use those. So this didn't quite work because I couldn't quite get things here in enough bulk. So I would need to leave some more room for that. So I would need to have something that could unload fish next to my fish warehouse. Another attempt I made was this warehouse. This is essentially a mirror of the individual city, like little town warehouses. So what is stored in here is the same as what is stored in here. And this warehouse tries to grab from all these haulers and all these other warehouses. It pulls it in here. And then these warehouses can be told to draw from here. This worked okay. This was probably the best thing I was able to do on this map, but it didn't really solve the problem of needing 15 workers here, and I'm still not really fully supplied. This is also pretty fragile. For example, getting stone from my stone area, the stone gets stored in here, and then it's supposed to be hauled up here, and then it is supposed to be hauled into there. That's a lot of people touching one stone to get it there. And then from here, it still needs to go out to the warehouse, and then from the warehouse, either to the market or to the janitor. So think about your logistics, think about how you're gonna move stuff around. If I was gonna do this again, I actually like the central warehouse idea. I just needed to leave myself a lot more room. And I need to play around with the loaders and unloaders, but I do think that's probably the way. at least from bringing things from the outside to the central location, maybe I could get away with haulers than redistributing it. Another little tip about haulers, because I kind of messed it up, was you want the hauler at the end destination, not the source. So these guys haul fish to here. So they go to this fishing area, they go to that fishing area, specifically the fish warehouses in that area, and they bring the fish over to here, and then ideally it's grabbed from here into this warehouse. It doesn't always happen. Despite me having 10k fish, I barely have any in my central warehouse. So it was working okay on this map, but that's only because every city basically had their own little fishing industry. In a map where that wasn't the case, that would be pretty hard. Or like the vegetables, having to get these distributed has been relatively difficult. My next tip was, as you're building buildings, sometimes you will get a yellow box. Let's just make something here. These boxes are where we don't have enough roof support, and these drastically increase the cost of maintaining the building. Well, first of all, I would try to design buildings in the early game especially that just don't have this problem. So all you need to do to get rid of that is shrink the room until you don't have yellow squares. But let's say, no, Babel, I do need a building that is that big. This just fits what I want. For example, here's my asylum, which you can see has some supports in it, because this is just how I wanted it. In that case, the way to make those pillars is simply the shrink room button. You just click that, you click a single square, and you can essentially add pillars to your design. Now this one, yeah, look at that. See, I don't like that. I struggle with that one a lot. I don't know. In my mind, I was expecting a button down here for adding a support. It's just a wall in the middle of the room is how this game treats those. So that's another little early game pro tip. And I definitely would make sure you have that. I don't think the yellow is worth it because your janitors will rapidly become quite busy. These ones are on auto hire up to 5 people. So you can see here's at 4, but that's because this isn't my only janitor. There's one over here. There's one up here. I have them spread around, but in the early game, I would just build one that can hold up to 5 and stick them on auto employee and just let it go. One thing is though, make sure you're periodically coming over and checking your maintenance. We had a point in this game where all of a sudden my irrigation turned off, and it turned out that these pumps were not properly being maintained because this janitor was overwhelmed. So just really, every once in a while, just give it a quick one over. You'll see, I don't even know if I have any bad spots because I've dealt with the problem, but you'll see like yellow or I think red if it's really bad squares where a janitor needs to go do some maintenance work there. So if you're starting to see those, first step would be A, make sure you're employing enough. B, make sure they have access to the things they need. So hence this warehouse is supposed to store everything that they would need to do any maintenance. And you know what that is because you know what you've used to build various buildings. So if none of these buildings had iron in them, I don't need iron up here. But as soon as I start adding things that have iron, I probably need to deliver a little bit of iron up here so that my janitors can efficiently keep the maintenance up and running. Next up is markets and food stalls. These are kind of important because your people would much rather get their stuff from there than just grabbing it out of the warehouse. Even if you have the various goods, so here I have fish, eggs, and vegetables because that's what my people like to eat. First of all, if somebody wants to come over here and eat a favorite food, they think of which food they want, and that's going to be based on your race's preferences for food. For us, it's fish, eggs, and vegetables. They're going to randomly pick a favorite and go to the market. If the favorite that they want is there, they're very happy, grab their food, chow down, good times. If the food that they didn't think of isn't there, then they just pick a different food and eat it, and they're not happy. So even if my guy likes eggs, if today he was feeling fish and he got there and they were out of fish and he has to eat an egg, he's not happy because he wanted to eat the fish. So at some point, you're probably going to want to try to have a decent supply of everything your race likes to eat. So you're always getting that happy bonus for having the food that they actually like to eat. Having the foods here, though, is not the only thing. Also make sure that you have your access screen and they're allowed to have whatever it is. So if I turned off fish, even if I have fish here, they would not be allowed to pick it up and eat it. That's a little more important for furniture. At the beginning of the game, I believe these all start off. You have to turn these up and on for them to get things out of the market to take to their homes. Be careful. This is a way to drain your supplies very rapidly. Very rapidly. In this game, I'm really struggling with leather. I have had to give them a little bit of access to leather recently because I could afford to import it. Before that, I had leather turned off because I just could not import it and I needed it for my libraries at the time. Same thing with cut stone. I had a huge surplus. I was like, oh, okay, I'll just gonna let them get as much as they want. You will churn through these things. So just be prepared that this is a lot of consumption. For example, let's look at the furniture here. We are using, for maintenance, 55 furniture, and for furniture in a house, we're using 62 for my population at 2 ticks. So you can imagine something like 5 ticks of cut stone is going to rapidly drain your reserves. And they have to replace those. It's not a one and done for each house. So that's going to be a constant upkeep cost once you turn those on. Another thing to consider is make sure you're right sizing your services and your housing. At one point in the somewhat early game, I was just expanding our initial town bigger and bigger and bigger and stuffing more and more people in here. Well, a couple things happened. One, I started to struggle to actually provide enough services to the people that were living here and demanded it, hence needing multiple markets, multiple food stalls, multiple speakers, etc., etc. In addition, you're at some point going to start walking really far away. So the people that had to work in this fishery spent a good chunk of their day just going from home to work. Recently, we had started another town up here, and that drastically cut down, even though this is still pretty far, drastically cut down on their walking. So one giant housing district is not going to work past the early game. You're going to want housing spread out to various industries to keep the work to walk time ratio low, aka they're working and not walking. But B, you're also just going to need to leave yourself space for enough services. I think this town was another one where I had services here and I didn't really have enough, so I had to kind of like start a second service area because originally all these houses were full, and you can see this was quite a populous area. It's lessened somewhat as other places have come online and the work has shifted to other places a bit. All right, builders, those are the things that I learned from this series, and most of that was very generously shared with me from commenters and viewers of the series. So a huge thank you to those who enjoyed the series, and especially to those who gave me some tips, gave me some thoughts, gave me suggestions. One of my favorite things is just learning and enjoying games alongside people. So some various generous commenters, you know who you are, that really gave me a lot to think about, answered my questions, helped clarify things, and I would encourage you guys to do the same thing. A lot of people like games that they like, and they're very happy to share with you if you ask questions, whether that's here on the comments of my channel or my Discord or the Steam forums or wherever you are. I think if you have a question, a lot of times people are going to be pretty happy to answer it for you. And for a complicated game like this, one of the best resources is other people who enjoy the game. You're going to learn so much from them by just asking questions. And yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who helped me on that. I'm looking forward to whenever we get around to another stream series of this game. We're going to probably do a multi-race city because I started to learn, as I got better, the limitations of a single race city. And for example, in this game, opiates. I really needed the opiates for my hospital system, and we are terrible at growing them, but they're stupid expensive. So I have very inefficiently built a bunch of opiate farms to supply our hospital system. Well, I learned a lot from the commenters, and would do things very differently next time around. All right, builders, I hope you enjoyed this Song of Six playthrough of The Closed Realm. I enjoyed myself immensely and really do look forward to, at some point, having an excuse to come in and do another stream series. Allegedly, the game is approaching its 1.0 release, so perhaps if we haven't done a playthrough by the time that happens, maybe that'll be our signal that it's time to again journey in to Song of Six. Great game, really enjoyed it. I think you will too if you haven't played it yourself. Final shout out, just another thank you if you enjoyed the series, if you watched it, if you commented. Thank you, thank you. I'm glad you are with me on this journey, and I look forward to seeing you in the next journey. All right, builders, that's going to be it for me. I hope you learned a few things here. If you have any final tips for me or anyone else, feel free to drop them down in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like. If you haven't subscribed, I hope I've earned your subscription. And if you want to support the channel, you can always join me live for a super chat. Leave a super thanks on a video or VOD that you particularly enjoyed. Check out the channel memberships that get you early access to videos. Or if you just want to give some tip and generic support, there's also a Patreon linked in the channel info. All right, till sea swallows all, builders. I'll see you at the bottom. Apple out.